Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Coder Conversations. Today, we have special guest, Matt Erlich. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, man, definitely glad to have you. You have a very interesting story. So, you mind going into your background a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I'm originally from New York City, but I moved out to North Carolina 2 years ago. And growing up, I was always like a builder of things. I used to always make things, so that kind of like set my career into the development and coding. It really set it up. But before moving to North Carolina, I was a park ranger and I worked for New York City Parks Department. And I really, really loved that job, but I just could not live in New York City anymore. So what I did was I found a park ranger job here in North Carolina, and myself and my wife moved here. And then um, after a while, I kind of realized that I I wasn't experiencing as much growth as I would have liked as a park ranger. So I was looking for a new career where I could constantly make things and improve on my skills. And then eventually I found sort of like an advertisement for full stack development. And I was like, what is full stack? I never heard of that. Then I started doing some research and I was like, oh wow, this has to do with code. Interesting. All right. I'll look into that. And then, yeah, I went on to Code Academy where I started, not in full stack on their front end career path. And I was basically hooked from day one. Like as soon as I wrote some HTML and I saw it appear on the page, I was like, I need to do this. This is amazing. Yeah, and then I started that last March, and I was studying and working really hard um, at my job, and then coming home and working on code until August, and then finally in August, I decided to quit my job and pursue this full time. So I've been doing that ever since, and just leveling up my skills and networking with people and really putting myself out there.
Oh, yeah, that's really interesting. It sounds very similar to my journey where I was working some other job, learning coding, and I just ended up, taking a year off to pursue it full time. What kind of gave you the courage to say, okay, I'm going to go after this full time?
Yeah, so I can be a really frugal person, and that really helped me a lot. I keep my expenses low. Actually, before even moving to North Carolina, I sold my nice sports car, which made me a little bit sad, but I was making payments on it. And my wife and I, eventually, after moving to North Carolina, moved in with her family. So we really made some sacrifices and kept our expenses low. And that fortunately allowed me to save a lot of money from the job that I was working, for about a little over a year's worth of expenses. So I knew that financially I would be set. And also, I'm the kind of person where once I decide like I'm going to do it, then I'm going to do it and I'm going to give it my full 100% effort. So I was pretty confident.
Was there like any mental struggles? Like at any point, did you kind of think, I don't know if I can actually do this? And how did you overcome those?
Oh yeah, like throughout, I would say starting from March, like the first 6 to 8 months of studying code, I experienced that pretty much weekly. Whenever I ran into problems, I'd think to myself, I have no idea what's going on. I cannot understand this at all. Maybe this isn't something that's for me. Maybe I should just find something else. Um, and what really got me through that was just saying, you know what? Let me take a break, go do something else. Let's do some exercise or maybe get some rest, and then come back at it either in an hour or even tomorrow. The next day, after getting some sleep, I felt a lot better and I was able to continue. And then after doing that a few times, when I would face a more difficult challenge, I would say to myself, okay, last time that I was here, what happened? I figured it out. It was really, really hard then. Now I understand it and it's a lot easier to me. Why don't I just do that again? Take a break, think about how I figured it out last time, and then do that again. So like once you understand like the process of thinking about code and how to solve problems, and you get used to that, it makes it a lot easier.
Exactly. I kind of find, I find like when you first start, it's a bunch of confusion. You don't know anything of what's going on, but piece by piece, you start building up your understanding. And the more problems you solve, the more you realize that you start solving the same problems over and over. So it becomes a little bit easier the more you progress. Um,
Yeah, I
all right.
think you have to I think you have to get used to that feeling of, "Oh, man, like, I have no idea what's going on," and you have to say to yourself, "It's okay, though, this happens a lot, and, we'll figure it out." If you're not used to, like, having some pushback or having a little bit of adversity and you just, like, hop right into it, it's going to be, like, a bit of a shock. So, you know, take it slow, always think about how you solved the problem before, and then I just apply that.
Exactly. It's kind of like working out. If you just work out, you know, within safe limits, you're never going to grow. It's kind of like when you work out to failure, that's really when you start making results. So, like you mentioned, it's that feeling of confusion, of doubt. That's kind of like how you know you're in that failure zone. Did you have like a mentor to kind of help you walk through some of the tough times? And how did you go about finding that mentor?
Yeah, so I think first what you kind of have to do is define what a mentor is for you, right? So I think a lot of us when we hear the word mentor, we think of that person who's holding our hand 24/7, we have full access to and we can just call them at any time and they're there. Um and for some people that can be a mentor, right? But for me, if you're somebody who once in a while when I get stuck, I could call upon you and just say, "Hey, can I borrow 5 minutes of your time to ask you this question?" And they help me out. That's really what I consider to be a mentor. So throughout my career, well, throughout my learning journey, I've had so many mentors, people who would just really just give me their time, and I've been super appreciative of it. So thinking about that, well, how do you find these people then? And I like the approach of actually having them find you, right? So, really just putting yourself out there, talking about who you are, talking about what you're doing, networking, talking about your struggles, what you're building. I love LinkedIn for this purpose because I always talk about what I'm doing, what I'm having an issue with. And then a lot of times somebody will comment, "Hey, I saw that you were talking about this. If you want, we could have a call either today or tomorrow or whatever, and then we could work on this together." And it's really that simple. And then for me, that person is like a mentor, right? They took the time out of their day to help me. So that's kind of how I see a mentor and really um, my way about finding mentors.
Absolutely. It seems like visibility is very powerful, like putting yourself out there. Aside from finding mentors, have you received any other benefits from just like being so visible on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think it's very important to just put yourself out there in general because if you don't, then there's a lot of competition in this field I've realized that. And if you're just another person who's putting in applications, then you're just another list on a huge, you're just another name on a huge list of these other people who are applying for the same role that you might be applying for. So you really, in my opinion, have to set yourself aside. So that's what I'm trying to do by really just put myself out there on LinkedIn through making videos. And I find that, yeah, people find you very easily if you're just, if you're honest, if you're real, if you're helping other people. Lots of other people are very attracted to that type of personality and they see you growing and then they want to help you grow. But if you're the type of person who's, not really going to talk a lot, and not network at all, then who's going to know that you exist? No one, right? So you can't help somebody if you don't know they're out there. So really put yourself out there and it attracts that type of energy of people who really just want to help you.
Exactly. Yeah, visibility has been a huge benefit in my career. Just from being on LinkedIn, I've had like recruiters from Facebook, Google, Amazon, all of them reach out to me. And whereas if I would have never posted, they would have never reached out. Um, so
And
oh, go ahead.
so I see it a lot. And what happens is like somebody, let's say somebody loses their job or they get laid off or something. This entire time they weren't being active. And when I say active, I don't mean you're on like social media all day. I mean like maybe once a day, take like 20 minutes out of your day and just try to talk about what you're doing or try to network. And I see people, unfortunately, they lose their job, and when they go on LinkedIn, they don't have those connections because they got set. They got their job and they're like, "Cool, I'm set now. It's all good." And now they have to network and try to find another job, and it takes a lot of time to build a network. It takes a lot of effort, and it doesn't happen immediately. So that entire time they could have been building their network, and now they could ask somebody for if they had a job or something like that. So I think it's a really, really big mistake to once you reach your goal of getting a job, to stop networking. I think that's a really big mistake.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of people make that huge mistake of after they get the job, they just disappear, and like you see with all these mass layoffs, now they're scrambling. Now all of those recruiters that they ignored, they're trying to reach out to them again, but are they really going to help you when they've spent the time to reach out to you, but you just put them on the back burner? I think that's a big mistake a lot of people make when recruiters reach out to you, especially as you get senior. You have a lot of recruiters hitting you up, and it can get overwhelming responding to them. But I would say take the 5 seconds to say, "Hey, I'm not looking for a job right now, but thank you for presenting this opportunity to me." Because in times like this, you're going to want somebody that's going to give you the best job opportunities. So even though you're not looking right now, whenever you are looking, that's when they're really going to come in clutch.
Absolutely.
So what has it been like actually applying for these jobs? Has that been a struggle, or how's that been going?
Well, so far I only applied for two opportunities so far, and I mean those two. It hasn't been a struggle. I knew that um, once I get to a certain point, I was going to just focus my full undivided attention towards that. And right now, I'm still working on my skills. So once I do get to that point, I'm just going to put a lot more effort into actually applying for more jobs, and then maybe like set the building aside for a little bit less time each day. But yeah, those two opportunities that I applied for, it wasn't really anything too difficult. But I hear that for a lot of folks, it's a sort of like a numbers game, and I could just imagine that eventually, when I get to that point, it might be a little bit more stressful.
Yeah, that's the exact game it is. Just about everybody I know, they've had to put in like 100 plus applications. Jonathan Jennings, he's the game developer we interviewed a couple episodes ago. He had to put in 300. So, um, if you're not prepared for it, it can discourage you. A lot of people take the rejection personally, but it's just a part of the game in a really saturated field. You just gotta keep going, keep going, keep going. Yeah, so I've seen that you also started a YouTube channel. Can you tell us like what made you want to start a YouTube channel?
Yeah, so originally it was quite selfish of me. So I wanted to just start a YouTube channel to put myself out there and say, "Hey, look what I'm doing," right? Especially when I apply for jobs or if I'm contacting recruiters, it's just something else that I had that I showed that I could talk to people and maybe show off a little bit of my personality. But eventually I thought about it and I was like, well, what did I need help with at my very, very beginning, right? I'm still new, but when I first started, and I remember searching YouTube and seeing so many people saying things like, "Oh, how I became a developer in 3 months," or "I started and right away I got a job." And I'm thinking, like, I don't know, that seems like you might have been like an outlier. And there's a lot of of other things that go on between just starting and maybe getting your job. So I wanted to fill in that gap, and I wanted to really share what I was going through and what I was learning while I was going through that process. And the more I started to do that, the more like the better feedback I got, and I was like, wow, this is actually helping people. Um, so yeah, what I talk about is um, saying things like, yeah, you might be struggling now, but it's okay to struggle. Like, this is how you might be able to work through things and figure stuff out. And yeah, I wanted to portray my learning journey and career path as accurately as possible, so maybe others could relate to it and not just compare themselves to, okay, I started and I got a job in 3 months.
Absolutely. I think it's a great point you made about the outliers because those are usually the videos that get highlighted, like the guy who came in, went through boot camp, came out, earned like a 200K salary or something. And, when you come out and it's not the same experience, you might get discouraged. Like, hey, where's my job? Or why aren't these companies offering me 150K? Or, so I think like you sharing your story, it provides a more diverse and realistic perspective because I think a big mistake a coder can make is like they come out of boot camp, they're watching all these hype videos and thinking they're going to come out and get a 150K job, but they turn down that one that's paying 75K when they should be taking that one and getting the experience because unless you live in the Bay Area or something, most jobs are not going to pay you these obscenely high salaries unless like your data structures and algorithms genius. So um, how I look at it, the first 2 years are your sacrifice years. You may not be getting paid what you want, but when you pay your dues and you really focus on learning, after those 2 years is really when you can negotiate a good salary because you have to. I'll go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, continue.
Okay, yeah, I was saying because you have the leverage of having experience, and you should have had time to make connections and really work your way up in the industry. Around the 2 year mark is when a lot of recruiters are going to start hitting you up.
Yeah, and I think it's very important that you talk about this type of information, and I really hold myself accountable and don't I do my best to not just say things like, "Oh, this was easy, like I just figured it out," or you know, portraying this idea that, okay, you're going to start, you're going to learn to code, you're going to get a job. Like, and I have this opinion because I talk to a lot of people on LinkedIn, and a lot of people don't have experiences like that. Um, so I'm not solely just speaking about my own experience. I'm also taking in views and opinions and the experience of other devs that are trying to get into um, trying to get a job. And I just want to tell other people who are starting, like, hey, it's okay that you're facing the struggle, and it's all right that you're having a hard time figuring it out. I'm doing the same thing, and I went through it too, and I didn't just get a job right away. So, hang in there. Um, and you'll be able to figure this out. Just keep going and hang in there.
Absolutely. It's all about that persistence and adapting. Like you're going to fail these interviews. And what you do is you pick up something with each and every interview that you fail. Like the reason I got my previous job was because I was interviewing at Tubi and, they gave me one of those live coding exercises where you got to share your screen. They say, hey, I want you to make this mini application. So I was just quietly solving, trying to solve the problem. And when I got my feedback, they rejected me. They say like I should be speaking while I'm coding the application. They want to see my or hear my thought process. So I took that knowledge, and on my next interview, I was actually able to utilize that. So while I was doing the live coding exercise, I was talking through everything I was doing step by step, and that's really what helped me get that next job. And that one paid more than the Tubi job. So, these each of these failures, they teach you a little something, and pretty soon you'll have an arsenal to where you can easily pass these interviews.
Yeah, I think that's really great, and it shows that you may not have, I guess, performed the way you had wanted to, but you took away a lesson from that experience and then applied it for the next one. And I think that really is great for just this type of career path in general. Like, you make mistakes, but if you learn from that mistake and don't make that same mistake the next time, I think that's a real win. Um, and that's what I'm trying to do as well. I very outright just talk about the mistakes that I'm making when I make them, and I think it's important to talk about the good along with the bad as well. And as long as you're continuing to grow and learn, I consider that a win.
Absolutely. What are some of the bigger mistakes that you've made, and how did you overcome them?
Um, Really, just I was making a lot of stupid mistakes early on in my code, and for me, I learned from my mistakes very quickly, but I have to make those mistakes, right? If I'm not making them early on, then it's hard for me to think about the potential mistakes that could happen in the future. So I have to experience that in order to learn from it. And yeah, even with even with like YouTube or just talking to people in general, it's like it's a skill that you have to learn and you have to continuously learn. And in my past career, I was a park ranger and I got very used to talking to big groups of people. But talking like this, like me and you, online, or even just being on camera, I was not used to it at all. And it was always really awkward for me. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to push myself to do it. And if I do really bad, then I do really bad and I'll learn from it. Um, so it's really just continuously thinking about it's okay to make mistakes. Like, that's how you grow and that's how you learn. So I make mistakes all the time.
Exactly. I think one of the more transformational ideas that I've learned is failing forward. Like you mentioned, failure is part of the process. School kind of teaches us that you know you don't want to make mistakes. You want to do everything right the first time, or else you start getting marked down, and that kind of makes you feel fear failing and keeps you in a safe zone. Whereas in real life, the only way to learn is to make mistakes and adjust. Like even as a baby, you're gonna take a few steps, fall, get back up, fall again. If we had that same attitude as a baby as we do with school, a lot of people still be crawling around because they'd be too scared to walk. So that's definitely a powerful attitude to have.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. When when I first started on LinkedIn, I made a post saying like, I just realized today that I suck at coding. And then after that, I was like, well, yeah, I just started. Like, you're kind of supposed to suck at things that you just start, and then you learn from then on. And I thought that really resonated with people because I think a lot of what's put out there is the positive, right? And when you're just exposed to like everyone doing so well, it's kind of discouraging. So that's why I try to say like, all right, I wasn't doing so well. I do suck at this right now, but that's okay because that's how you experience growth.
exactly. I'm a Dragons had an interesting comment. He said apply the same principles that machine learning, aka learn by experiencing failure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I experienced the most growth. Not even in just code, in my life in general. When I've made mistakes or failed at something.
Absolutely. And I think us getting our stories out is very important because we don't have traditional computer science backgrounds. We weren't necessarily like a coding genius being taught coding since we were 5 years old. My degree is actually in accounting, and I was working at a hotel teaching myself to program, and you were a park ranger. So I think these stories are inspirational for people who come from non-traditional computer science backgrounds.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It shows that if you apply yourself and you can get through the hard times and can really stick to it, that you can eventually achieve your goal. And I think your story really sets that up and portrays that idea.
What would you what is some advice you would give somebody who is just starting their coding journey, and they're getting frustrated, maybe they're applying to jobs and not getting the responses that they want?
Yeah, so I think networking is really important because if you keep to yourself and you're not talking to anyone, then you can't, and just maybe you're just watching like YouTube videos, then you're kind of seeing like just everyone's success story and you're comparing yourself to that, right? But I think it's important to talk to other people, and if you pay attention to other people's growth and their stories, it might put that into perspective for you. So you're not just thinking, okay, everyone's just getting a job here. What am I doing, right? Um, what's another thing? Have lots of patience. That's really something. I had patience before, but nothing quite like what I have now after trying to program. Um, especially in the beginning, it takes a lot of patience, and it can suck really bad when you're hit with that failure and you're working on something and you're just getting nowhere. It could feel really demoralizing, but that's okay. I think most of us go through it, especially in the beginning. And when you're starting to feel like that, um, just take a break, because what I did was I got into this cycle of, okay, I don't understand this, so now I'm getting annoyed, and now I'm trying it again with an annoyed brain, and then I'm not figuring it out again, and then it was just like a really bad cycle. So take a break, go do something fun. I would play video games for like 25 minutes and then come back to it, or exercise, or go eat something, and then come back with a clear mind. Um, Another thing is to ask for help. I ask for a lot of help, and I think it's really important because let's say you're struggling with something for a day, 2 days, 3 days. You could have asked somebody else for help and they could have helped you with that. And maybe it would have taken 30 minutes or an hour, um, which also goes to the point of why networking is so important. The amount of times that I've struggled on something for way too long and then finally said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to ask somebody for help, and then they answered and then they helped me, and the issue was resolved almost immediately. And I'm saying to myself, why did I take so long to just ask somebody? Right? It doesn't make you look stupid to ask for help. It's very important, and do it more often than not, because it's a lot. You might be wasting a lot of time by just trying to figure something out. It's important to really work through a problem, but you kind of have to realize if you're getting nowhere, just ask somebody.
Exactly. I think that's a really important skill, is just knowing how to reach out to people when you get stuck, not just marinating in that same problem for days and just letting that problem defeat you. I think a lot of times junior developers, they might feel intimidated reaching out to seniors because they think the senior developer might snap on them or something like that. But more times than not, if you've done your research, you come to them and show them that you put forth effort, they'll be more than willing to help you. Um, I think if you just come to them and you didn't do any work, you just say, "Hey, solve this problem for me," then that's where you might get the unpleasant response. But you know, if you showcased a few solutions that you've done, that they'll be more than willing to help you.
Yeah, I also think, especially in the beginning, there's a lot of advice out there, and I'm the type of person where I listen to really everyone. If you have an opinion and you're more experienced than me, I want to hear it. But it's very important to not just do what everyone says, right? You really have to think about the advice that's being given to you, because a lot of people, actually, I think pretty much everyone gives advice with really great intentions, but that sort of thing might not apply to you. Originally, in the beginning, I was speaking to a senior dev, and I was kind of just like asking them a bunch of questions, and they gave me the advice to not work on YouTube or do this type of thing, to really just focus on code. And I thought, maybe if I would have stuck to that, uh, it might have been like a really bad idea. And I'm happy that I didn't listen to that advice. Um, and also, a lot of things that work for somebody else might not work for you, and vice versa, right? So for me, I really love to take physical notes. It helps me learn so much quicker than when I don't take physical notes. It's just something that happens where when I write something down, it sticks in my head a lot longer. Early on, I got the advice, more or less, that if you're writing physical notes, then you're kind of doing something wrong, and you're learning the wrong way. Maybe, maybe not, but that's how I learn. And if that's going to get me to understand the information the quickest, that's what I'm going to do. Right. So, listen to people who are further along than you, but also really think about what they're saying to you, and apply it to yourself.
Absolutely. It all comes down to doing what works for you. But yeah, man, it's great that you are sharing your story because Vasily, he said, it's inspiring. And, you
Yeah,
know,
I really appreciate that. Thank you. I think a lot more of us go through this sort of thing. But it can feel embarrassing to talk about it. That's why I put a lot of emphasis on talking about my failures, because it really should be more natural to talk about failure than it kind of is online. I know you might feel embarrassed or feeling like you're less than somebody else um, for failing, and for making mistakes. But if more people actually talk about it, then that kind of goes away. And I want to be one of those people that's putting forth this idea that it's okay to share your downs as much as it's okay to share your ups.
all the time. Okay. Yeah. I think
Oh,
we disconnected for a second, but we're back. But,
did I get cut off?
oh, no, we hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, just to go back to your point, like about you sharing your failures, I think that's important because like on Instagram, people literally get disorders from watching all of these. In their feed, they see everybody happy, they're getting married, and all these great things are happening, and they're like, "Why isn't my life like that?" But the reality is their life isn't like that either. It's not good to only see the highlight reels. You need to show the failure so that people know the reality of what to expect.
Yeah, and I think in a more realistic place like LinkedIn, where I guess there's less of that sort of fakeness, when somebody does get that position maybe that I want, I get super happy because now I could be like, wow, how did you do it? And now I could learn from you. um, and I think that's important too. Always try to learn from, if somebody ahead of me did it, then I don't want to have this feeling of, oh well, how did they get it, why am I not there? I had this feeling of, wow, that's awesome, that's really cool, I'm happy for you, how did you do it, and what can I learn from your experience?
Exactly. That's definitely the attitude to have, man. You know, the reality of telling the downsides is so that when other people go through it, they're not gonna jump ship. They're not gonna go crazy because okay, he's been through it and he made it through safely. So it's part of the process. Like, Google and all these other companies having mass layoffs right now. Some people take it personally and think maybe I'm not good enough, or, I put my all in all into this company and they're laying me off. Why did this happen? But the reality is, you know, in corporate America, you're a resource. You know what I mean? Like, you give your labor, they give you something back. They have no obligation to keep you on. I was let go from my first job, and I had just signed a new lease a little bit before that, so I was really in a bad position. But I was able to overcome that just by being persistent. So yeah, I want everybody to know that there's going to be down times, but if you stick with it, you can overcome them.
Yeah, and I also think a lesson that I also learned from you is to just really keep your expenses low, and don't A lot of us, and I've experienced this in the past, where I got like my first like actual career, and then I just started spending more, and then I got paid more and spent more. And I think what we could learn from this period of time, especially in tech, is sure things seem stable now, and it seems like a guarantee, but the reality is that's just not how it is. And this is teaching me a lesson, even though I don't have a tech job yet. It's teaching me to like, okay, when I get my first job, keep my expenses low. I don't need to go upgrade my life immediately. And I've heard you talk about that as well.
Oh man, that's a huge thing, man. The one thing I learned about this industry is you can make huge sums of cash quick, but you kind of have to think about the famine periods because there are lots of layoffs in tech. Um, you're going to be shuffling around, so you always want to have that nest egg so that in times like these, you have something saved up and you're good to go. And also another thing that a lot of people don't talk about is there's toxic managers out there. You can get in a job, you think, hey, everything's awesome, but your manager, he makes your life a nightmare. He's screaming, yelling. You don't want to be at that company, but you don't have any savings, so you're stuck. So you got to kind of put up with the abuse. So, by having that huge nest egg, you want to give yourself the ability to walk off any job that you don't want to be at.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about some of the non-technical skill information, because we're exposed to a lot of that, especially in like, I don't know, courses that we take, or any sort of technical education. But you don't get a lot of that other stuff like networking, finances, how to talk to people, how to market yourself. These are all important skills that I'm learning now. So for anyone just getting into it and maybe a few steps behind me, start thinking about that stuff as well, and not just the technical stuff. And I actually have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What would be your pitch to somebody for the pros and cons of getting into this career?
Okay. So, around 2015 or so, when the jobs were plentiful, you had all the commercial, like everybody should become a coder, everybody should do an hour of code and this and that. I was like telling all my friends, hey man, y'all need to come into the industry. You can make a lot of money, this and that. And that's true. I actually love the act of coding. And yeah, I made a nice amount of money in the industry. So those are kind of like the pros. I'm able to do what I love and I'm able to make a living off of it. Now the cons is the industry isn't stable. You're probably not going to have a big life outside of coding for a while because you're going to have to constantly learn technologies, constantly learn new frameworks. You don't want to become complacent. Like, this is something that a lot of people don't talk about, but if you're not careful, you can get frozen into place and become like a legacy coder. So, for example, when I first started coding, Ruby on Rails was the hot framework, but how many Ruby on Rails jobs do you really see nowadays? You hardly hear about the framework anymore. You might see one or two postings every few months. So imagine if you dumped all your studies into Ruby on Rails and you don't really have time outside of work to study something new. Like, you could get frozen and become like a legacy developer, and it's going to be hard to get new jobs coming forward. So before I would just unilaterally say, hey, you guys need to become coders, but now it's a lot more measured. It's like you have to love to learn, you have to love coding, and then I would recommend it to you. But you know if you don't, there's a lot of perils and pitfalls that a lot of people aren't telling you about because they want to sell that positive image so you can go buy their course or come into their boot camp. But I prefer to tell you the realistic side of it, so you can really decide if this is for you or not.
Yeah, and I think the constant growth and the constant learning can be a pro and a con, because if you're not prepared for that, it might stress you out. It might seem like I'm putting in all this work and I'm understanding things, but like, I have to learn the next thing. But for me, it was actually a pro, because as a park ranger, I was getting very complacent. Early on, I learned constantly. And then I got to the point where I could do my job really, really well without having to do pretty much any extra work. And that bothered me a lot. Like, I like to work my butt off and then reap the rewards of working my butt off, right? Whereas as working for the government, you you could do bare minimum work. Person next to you could do amazing work and go above and beyond every day, and you get the same benefits. So I really wanted to learn constantly and grow constantly, improve myself constantly, and that's why I really like this career choice.
Yeah, absolutely. You would be somebody that I would recommend to come into this field because you love learning. You don't want to be complacent. You don't want to be mediocre. But if it's somebody who kind of wants to study for 2 or 4 years and just coast off of that knowledge for the rest of their career, this isn't the field to come into.
Yeah, oh yeah, and yeah, it really is just constant learning. Even And that's why it's so important to really look back at where you started. I talk about that a lot too. Like, even just a month ago, I look at my code and I'm like, who wrote that? Because this looks awful. And I'm sure a month from today, I'm going to look at back at the code I'm writing today and say the same thing. So if you're feeling discouraged, I think it's really important to periodically look back at the things you were doing last month, 6 months ago, and what you can do now. And um, that really can show your growth. And I think it's very important to do that.
Erlich joined.
Okay, there we go. I think we lost you for a second.
Oh, where did I get cut off?
I think you were talking about like like how you love to learn, and this is kind of like the industry for learners.
Yeah, yeah, and it's important to periodically look back at where you were before, and compare that to where you are now, because that really was great motivation for me, seeing how the problems that I was solving back then is way different than the problems that I'm solving right now. And what I was learning before, way different as well. And I think if you're feeling discouraged, it's important to do that every once in a while.
Absolutely. Um, I would say another con of the industry is the interview process. I'm not sure. You said you had a couple of interviews. Did you have to go through like round after round after round, or what was it like for you?
No, so they were applications for like apprenticeships and like internships. So as far as actual jobs go, I haven't experienced that yet, but I'm absolutely open to hear about it.
Sure. So even as you get senior, there's like at a lot of these companies, there's several rounds of interviews. You're going to be speaking with like different panels of people, and a lot of them have like live coding exercises. So they'll be like, hey, I'm gonna send you a link. You click the link, and it's gonna share your screen, and you're gonna have to like code like mini applications. So you remember I mentioned earlier about learning to talk through what you're doing while you're coding. That's
Yep.
something really important that to keep in mind. I don't know if you do that now, but you may want to practice this. Like, hey, I'm passing data from this component to this component by doing this. Like, you want to be very vocal about what you're doing. That's going to come in really handy when you're interviewing. Um, I would also say, like you mentioned, you need to have those social skills to just be able to connect with the interviewer, and you have to think about yourself as the product. Meaning, when you're on the interview, you don't want to just ramble on and on and on. You want to think about, why are they hiring me? They're hiring you to provide value to the organization. to fill this specific position. So, okay, if you're interviewing for a Python job, you don't want to be talking about like your C++ experience or how you dabble with, five other languages. You want to focus on, I use Python to bring value to organizations by doing this. Like, you have to see what they want and align your resume or your experience with that.
Yeah, you kind of have to play the game.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think it's important because I feel like it's so unnatural to really talk about yourself to someone in that sort of way, but it's an important skill that you should practice and build upon. And it's something that I definitely have to practice as well. Because it's not how I normally talk day to day to people. You have to practice selling yourself.
Exactly. It's something I had to work on myself. Like, I had to kind of distinguish between the different forms of communication. Like, even on LinkedIn, sometimes I like to talk in like long scholarly posts and, huge paragraphs, but people just scroll right past that. So, you break things down into smaller sentences, maybe use emojis. I don't like communicating like that, but like you say, you got to play the game. You have to, you're catering to the person that you're selling the product to. So you're selling your labor to them. So you got to kind of adjust things so that, they really want to purchase the product, which is you.
Yeah, absolutely. What led you towards making content like this?
Sure. So, um, I used to make these kind of posts all the time on Facebook. Um, but, like the Bible, Jesus said, like, a prophet is not accepted in his own town. Like, I'm not a prophet or anything, but it's like sometimes you try to help people out. You post this kind of content, but it's the wrong environment for it, so they don't want to hear it. Like, nobody will like it. I get zero likes. It's just like I'm posting to myself, talking to myself. But I really like helping people. I want to see people level up. I want to see people get better. So I just took the same content on LinkedIn, and I actually was able to get way more traction. So, when people is actually responding to you, you're giving them knowledge that's helping them change their lives. It kind of encourages you to keep on with it. So that's really what encouraged me to do this. And that also leads me to an important lesson. It's sometimes you have to get out of a particular place and go somewhere else for you to really flourish. So I was 30 years old, still living at home, making $11 an hour. You kind of feel like a loser then. But I moved out here to Dallas Fort Worth. I got my first coding job, and I went from making 23K a year to making over 200K in total compensation.
Yep, still here.
Okay, there we go. What was the last thing you heard?
Oh boy, I don't remember.
Okay,
You were talking about sometimes you have to get out of the wrong environment um,
absolutely.
in
Yeah.
terms of LinkedIn versus Facebook.
Like, have you found the same thing? Like, you tried to, speak to people in a certain place, they wasn't really hearing you, but then you went to a different crowd and things were completely different.
Oh yeah, even now I post something on on LinkedIn, and I get a lot of feedback. If I go to Twitter and post that same thing, it's crickets over there. I get I get absolutely nothing. So I think maybe, yeah, you are right. Like maybe the type of thing that I like to talk about really suits LinkedIn. And I think it's very important to really love what you're doing and really love to help people. That's what keeps me going. Because some days I wake up and I'm like, I don't feel like talking. I don't really want to, talk about what I'm doing or anything like that. But I really do love helping other people. So that's what keeps me going day to day.
Absolutely. I am Dragons. Kevin, what qualities do you think a senior lead dev should have, both technically and soft skills? So yeah, I'll tackle this and I'll let you speak on it from like a junior perspective. So what I think is you should really know your tech stack really in depth. Like for example, if you're an Angular guy, you need to know the framework up and down, so that what really makes you a senior dev or a lead dev is that when a problem occurs, they can go to you to solve it, and you can solve it quickly. And another set of skills that you really need to start thinking about is you don't want to just be capped at being good at coding. You have to be good at communicating. You have to be good at working with a team and getting your team to come together to solve problems, because you're going to have a lot of junior developers asking you questions and you have a lot on your plate. So you're going to have to learn to manage your time and not get frustrated and take the time to answer their questions. Initially, junior developers, they have a lot of questions because they're curious, they're trying to learn the code base, they're trying to get on track. So don't get frustrated with them, just give them the knowledge they need, and you're going to find that they become more and more autonomous. They're going to start learning how to do things themselves. And it's good that they're asking you questions because they want to code in a fashion that's in alignment with the paradigm that you're setting down. So, you're also going to have to learn how to empower your team, meaning if I see that, okay, you're not the greatest at this aspect of coding, I can say, hey, man, this is how you do this. This is a great book to read on this subject, and it's going to help you take your code to the next level. And especially once you get in the industry, there's a thing called code reviews. So typically, once you code something up, you can't just submit it and it just gets put in a code base. People are going to have to look at it. So, like as a senior, when you're reviewing somebody, especially a junior's code, you have to take a balanced approach. Like I can't just, it's like say Matt submits a PR and I see some things I don't really like. I can't just go hammer him on it. I have to also say, hey man, this is great code, but can you make these changes? And then give him an explanation, just to keep things consistent. Um, it's good to always put semicolons. If we keep letting this kind of stuff slide, the code base is going to get really sloppy and unmaintainable. So you mind just putting that in, like it's just learning how to communicate with your team members and empowering them. And that's really what's going to like make you more of a lead developer. You got to start thinking beyond yourself and how the team can come together and solve problems. What about you, Matt? What do you think makes like a good senior from a junior's perspective?
Yeah, so I always fall back on my previous experiences, and I think we've all had those jobs or those positions where our managers maybe weren't the best, or we had to deal with some really rough people. And I always learn from those experiences, right? I keep them in my head and I say, okay, this is what they did, and this is how it made me feel. So I want to remember that and not do that. I want to do the opposite of that. So I think that's really important. And I always try to think about talking to people how I would want to be talked to. I was considered a senior park ranger, and I mentored a lot of junior park rangers. And of course, they made mistakes, especially when they first came onto the job. And I really thought about, okay, back when I was a junior, how did people talk to me, and how did it make me feel? And then, if it was good, that's how I what I want to do, for you as well. And I think it's also important to think about things like, let's say I ask you, Kevin, for help, and I ask you, for, I don't know, 10 minutes of your time, and we do a video call, and at the end I'm like, all right, cool, goodbye. You'd be like, whoa, I don't think I would want to help that person again. So I think it's important to be a great senior dev, but coming into the job, I think it's important to be personable as well, right? And experience gratitude for those who are putting in time to help you. I try to do that as often as possible. If you give me any of your time, I know how valuable that is, and I want to show gratitude for that. So yeah, it just boils down to treat people how you want to be treated.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. It's kind of like you going into battle, and you're the general. You want to set that example. Your guys are going to fight a lot harder for you if you do what you're telling them to do. Like if I'm saying, "Hey, go into that crowd," and you know your life is on the line, and I'm sitting back. I'm not riding into battle. You're gonna be like, why am I gonna fight hard? He's not putting anything on the line. So, like you as a senior, anything you ask your juniors to do, you have to be willing to do first. You have to demonstrate that, uh, and they're gonna fight harder for you. And also, you have to protect your team. Like that's something Brian Pulliam mentioned. Like you could be like an umbrella where you're shielding your team, or you can actually bring the problems into the team. Like that's the bad manager. So you know you have to go to bat for your team members. Say for example, you have a manager, and he's asking one of the junior developers, hey, what are you doing? During the stand up, he's kind of chewing out the junior. As a senior, you might want to stand up for him, like, hey, don't worry about it. I'm gonna work with him, and we're gonna solve this problem together. He just didn't have the proper information, but I'm gonna make sure he gets it. Like, you want to make the people on your team feel like they have somebody that's kind of like protecting them and going to bat for them, and you have to give them the feeling that they're not on their own. Like when you first come into a team, you don't want to be in an environment where it's like, if I don't figure this out by myself, I'm gonna be fired. You know what I mean? You want to be like, okay, I don't really understand this. I can reach out to my senior dev, and he's gonna walk me through this. Like just giving that feeling of security is very important as a senior when you have juniors on your team.
Yeah, and when I was a senior ranger, when my team would make mistakes, I would pull them to the side and be like, "Hey, this is what you did. It's all right. You know, maybe learn from this." And but on the other side too, I really, really believe in positive reinforcement. So when they did something great, I would have that energy, like, "Awesome, that was really, really good. I noticed that you did this." And I don't think you necessarily have to have that much energy when you're doing that, but I think positive reinforcement is very important, because it kind of shows like, oh, now the person could be like, oh well, that was really good, I want to do more of that, as opposed to being like just feeling demoralized after doing something bad.
Exactly. That's very powerful. And it's kind of like think about you're a quarterback in the NFL. You don't want to blast your team members publicly. Like you don't want to blast your team in front of the manager and all of that. Like you mentioned, pull them to the side and say, hey man, I want you to do this differently, because if you don't, this is going to be the result. Like if praise people publicly but criticize them privately. You know what I mean? Like help them save face, and you're gonna find that these guys are gonna go to bat for you.
Yeah, so I have a question that I face, and I know a lot of other people face too, because I've talked to them about it. It's knowing when when you're ready to actually apply for jobs. Like, how do you know where you're like, okay, I'm ready to start applying for jobs now? How
I
did
would
you
say
know?
I would say just apply now, because there's like no really particular sign that's gonna say, hey, I'm ready. what you applying is actually going to do is you're going to get interviews, and the interviews are going to tell you what you need to know. The interviews are going to be the litmus test of you seeing your strengths and weaknesses. So you go on one interview and, oh, I can't answer this and this question about React. What you do is you write those questions down and you research them in your free time, and you keep on going through these interviews and researching the questions that you don't have the answer to. And pretty soon you're going to come to a point where, you're going on all these interviews and you're finding they're asking you the same questions over and over. And since you've already researched the answer to them, you're going to be able to knock the interview out of the park. I mean, I Am Dragons mentioned something similar. So I would say, take the interviews immediately, but don't look at them as an assessment of who you are as a coder. Just look at it as almost like a personality test, a strength and weaknesses test. It's going to tell you this is what I'm missing, because we can speculate all day long about what this or that company wants, but the best way to find out is to actually go through the interview process. So, I would say every day, probably just apply to 10 different companies, just get on the phone calls with the recruiters, have the conversations, and make sure you're writing down the stuff that you mess up on and research that. And, pretty soon you're going to become a polished interviewer or interviewee.
Yeah, it's a skill like any other. And I guess what's the worst that could happen? You don't get the job, but you learn something. Best case scenario, you get the job. So it's kind of a win-win.
Exactly. Like, if you never took the interview, you wouldn't have that knowledge and you still be without a job. So there's literally no reason to not do it.
Absolutely.
Did you have any other questions?
No, that's really it for I guess that's really it for me. Oh, actually, I think it's really important to as I said, to ask for help. But for a junior, like just getting on the job, I think it could feel like you're asking for too much if you ask for help, very, very often. So what would you what advice would you have for somebody who's thinking that?
So I would recommend that initially you're going to have to learn how to try to research the problem on your own. So it looks like you put in some legwork, but seniors will be a lot more likely to help you if they see that you're putting in the effort. Like, nobody wants to be on the job with somebody that, it feels like they're trying to get you to do their job. But, even though you're a junior and you're not trying to do that, if you're not putting in the time and research, it's going to feel like that to the senior. And learning to research and solve problems on your own, that's something that it's part of the industry. It's a core part of the industry. You're not always going to have someone to ask you for help. But I feel like as long as you've taken some time and did some research, tried out some solutions, they will definitely be eager to help you out. So here's kind of like, say you're the senior, right? And I can't figure out something in React. If I just say, hey, Matt, what is a component? Like, I'm asking you really basic questions that, I should know. I can find out in 5 minutes by reading the documentation or doing a Google search. And I keep asking you these questions. It's going to start agitating you after a while because you have a lot to do. And it's like, I'm not putting in any sort of legwork myself. But if I come with you with a specific problem, like, hey, I'm getting an error on passing data into this component, and here's some of the solutions that I tried. Here's a specific error. I went to Google, and this is the article I've come across, and I still can't figure it out. You mind taking 5 minutes out and helping me out? Like, you're going to be a lot more likely to help me out because, okay, he's trying.
Yeah, I think that last bit of information really laid it out for how to ask for help. Saying like, "Hey, I tried this. This is what's going on. I did this to try and figure it out. I still have an issue." Yeah.
Did you have the same experience when you was as a park ranger, like juniors asking you questions? Like, did they, they have to ask in a way where it looks like they've at least tried to look up the answer?
I would say it's very different
Okay.
because as a park ranger, there's not a whole lot of time that you're spending working on your own thing. It's really like group based. So we're usually together a lot. And if you come across an issue, a senior is going to be right there. So it's not necessarily like taking away from what I was doing to help you. Whereas, me asking a senior dev, I'm taking their time now. So I think it's not really too applicable. Because I was always like, hey, if you get into something, ask me right away. We could figure this out together. So it's a bit different.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I think that's the best approach, really. But just the realities of the industry. Like seniors, they have a lot of times they have like the bulk of the application on their shoulders, so they're really stressed out a lot of times. So, when people are asking them questions, it's kind of like I don't have a bunch of time, so um, make it easier for me to answer your question. It's kind of like that attitude.
I think that's fair.
But yeah, man, we definitely want to have you on. I know we're getting to the past the hour limit. I know you probably got things to do, man. But yeah, we definitely want to have you back.
Yeah, I hope next time I come back, I have a job update, and then we can maybe talk about that. That'd be awesome.
Absolutely, man. We appreciate you coming on. We thank everybody for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next time. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Peace.
Bye, everyone.